So I understand making a video about 10 reasons why you shouldn't live in Japan with this kind of background isn't necessarily making for the best kind of argument, but let me tell you, by the end of this video, you'll have a better idea of whether you actually want to live in Japan, if this is the right place for you, or you might just be totally freaked out with everything that I have to explain. So I moved to Japan 2 years ago, and ever since I get a lot of messages from different people asking about what it's like to live here. And today I'm here to explain a little bit more about why you might not want to live here, especially if you had just visited Japan and kind of you're thinking about maybe living here. I want to explain maybe things that you might not have considered or stuff that's actually been reasons that I've been like, okay, I don't know if I want to live in Japan long term for this reason, and reasons why I had actually put it off for a long time because of what I had heard from other people. And the reason I'm making this video is there is a lot of information on why you should live in Japan, but not as much about why you shouldn't. And so today I want to give you guys the raw, honest things that I've experienced as well as things that I've heard so that you can make your own decision. And I get it, Japan is beautiful. I fell in love with Japanese in Japan in 2012, and since then I've been studying the language for over 7 years. But on the flip side of things, I've also heard a lot of reasons why people shouldn't move to Japan, and actually was part of the reason why I had put it off for so long. And so it wasn't until the spring of 2023 when I actually moved here, because I personally wanted to see if a lot of these things were even true and make a judgment for myself. And I definitely learned the hard way, whether it was doing a horrible job separating my trash or absolutely killing it at Meishi Kokan. I definitely learned a lot in these last 2 years. So with that, let's get into the video. Okay, starting with the first reason, parks in Japan close at 4:30 p.m. And that's why we're here right now. Okay, just kidding. But if you go to parks as nice as the one that I was in, yes, they do close super early at about 4:30 p.m. And so, yes, I did get kicked out, and this is the next day, and we are still filming this video. So let's get straight into it. Reason number one of why you might not want to move to Japan is Japan loves paperwork. The bureaucracy here is absolutely wild. Fax machines are still being used, and just about anything will take a lot of forms. They might even require something called a hanko, which is essentially a stamp that is basically your signature. So in Japan, instead of written signatures, they have a stamp that includes your kanji character for your family name. Obviously, if you are a foreigner like me, that is not necessarily what your last name looks like, and so you can get them specially created for you. And I remember when I was first moving to Japan, I did look up a lot into these kinds of things, but realistically, things like hanko, I've never had to use it myself. You might only see yourself really needing it when you're getting a unique bank account or purchasing a home. And so for the most part, Japan has caught up quite a bit in terms of signatures and whatnot, so that is definitely totally fine. However, Japan is still really behind in terms of all things paperwork. So when I was first trying to get a bank account in Japan, it was a nightmare. I applied for a bank that I just knew the name. It was really well trusted in Japan. However, it wasn't very foreigner friendly, so when I was applying, first of all, it took a lot of moving around to kind of just get my middle name in the picture because Japan doesn't have middle names, and so it's kind of a foreign concept, and so their systems aren't necessarily ready for that, but you know, they saw it coming. Great. However, what we did not see coming is that my name on my visa is written in English and my application was with my name in Japanese. However, their system only allowed for Japanese written names, and so you know, it became this whole thing where we were just sending mail to each other back and forth, and I wanted to cry. And so basically, I just went with the bank that all the foreigners go with, Yucho, and that's kind of how I started here. Even then, it was really hard because I was in between moving share houses, and even with a little bit more than a month of time before I had to move, they were like, we cannot make this bank account for you because your cash card is going to be delivered to your old address and we can't do anything about it. And in that moment, I wanted to cry, and so I basically spent the first 3 to 4 months of working my brand new job in Japan, getting my paycheck paid in cash, and I just remember the CEO of the company being like, huh, I've never had to pay someone in cash before. And I was like, first time for everything. I think a lot of the paperwork and systems are not really built out for foreigners, and that's fine because foreigners make up a very small percentage of the overall workforce. However, if you're planning on living here, I think it will still be another 5 to 10 years before things really start picking up and making life here so much easier for foreigners. So if you're planning on living here, keep that in mind. Another thing is that whenever you're trying to create a bank account or do anything that requires like proper paperwork, I think the safe assumption assumption is to assume that you're kind of going to be doing the manual method of everything, which means, going straight to the bank office or going straight to the post office and doing all these things in person. So I've gone to the tax office, the bank, all these things, and usually the online version, the app version, they tend to not have all the systems ready to accommodate a foreigner. And number two, housing for foreigners is hard. Even if you speak great Japanese, dress well, have the money, you can still get rejected by landlords in Japan. If you guys saw my recent video with Tokyo Portfolio, Alex let me know a little bit more about why it is that foreigners actually get rejected from these apartments. And unfortunately, a lot of it is the language barrier, but more than that, it tends to be the cultural barrier. If this person was cooking food that's super smelly, or they take out trash and it also has smelly foods or anything like that, and they might invite their friends, etc. It's just like, from the landlord's perspective, they can't really assume what that person is going to do because their culture is so different. And so that's kind of why they're like, you know what, you're rejected. And that just makes things a lot easier for them. But I do think down the line there will be even more foreigners living in Japan, especially given with everything happening in the world at the current moment. And so I do see that changing like a lot. And so getting an apartment for me had never been too much of a struggle. But when I was looking for apartments in general, I am asked, am I a foreigner? Do I have a proper visa, etc., etc.? So that is part of kind of the system here, and it's not gonna kill you, it's not too bad, but I have heard many horror stories, so it is indeed hard getting an apartment in Japan. So do prepare for that. I would say give yourself at least a month to find an apartment. If you find it earlier, good for you, but for the rest of you, you will need a month. And I found this interesting statistic. Over 40% of landlords who refuse foreign tenants do so because of anxiety over communication and cultural differences. Yet, only 1.5% of landlords reported to actually have problems with foreign tenants, indicating that these fears may be largely unfounded. It's hard to assume a lot of this, but I do think that it tends to be the main reason why landlords refuse foreigners. And number three, loneliness is real. So when I came to Japan, I do think I struggled with loneliness quite a bit. I would say the first year is just genuinely a party. It is literally the best time ever. But you know what? Living in Japan is not a linear experience. There's ups and downs, and I think the beginning is like, you're up here. And after the year-ish mark, you kind of start to realize what living here actually requires mentally and physically. And so that's when the loneliness kicks in. And I know Japan is known as this vibrant, fun city, which it definitely is, but as you know, loneliness here for Japanese people and foreigners alike is a very real problem. Especially if you don't speak Japanese, it is pretty hard to break into new friend circles, especially if you're trying to be friends with people who have, grown up here. And the reason why is Japan has very tight community circles, and what that looks like is, if you have Tanaka-san here, he probably has friends from middle school, he hangs out with his high school friends, college friends, work friends, and that's it. And these groups never mingle, they never meet each other, but it provides him with a certain level of security knowing that he has these friend groups. But there's no reason that if I start waltzing into Tanaka-san's life, he should put me in this high school friend group or college friend group. There's no reason to him why he should mix me into those groups. Instead, I get to be his one and only gaijin friend. And that's kind of how it ends up being. And that's kind of what I've heard personally. But the friends that I tend to make are kind of seen as weird from other Japanese people as well, because they might be a little bit more eccentric, super open to commingling their friends and stuff. And so it really depends who you find. These generalizations I'm making are generally the majority population and kind of how Japan as a society is built to run for this majority. And I also heard this super interesting concept of momo and kokonatsu, and that basically means peach and coconut. It's said that Japanese people are kind of like a coconut, where you get to try to be friends with this person, but you have this hard shell that you kind of have to get through. But once you get through inside, it's soft, it's coconut, they're super sweet and friendly, and you've kind of made it in. But getting to that point is really, really hard. Whereas in the States or in other countries, it can kind of be like a momo, a peach where it's like straight off the bat, you're getting along, having fun, banter, all that stuff, but it is kind of hard to get to that root really deep inside of that person to truly feel close to them. And so that's kind of how some people describe it as, and I would say it's a good description of what you can expect in Japan. Okay, number 4, work culture in Japan is no joke. If you're working for a Japanese company, my condolences, because you're probably expected to work very long hours, go to nomikai, and also expected to participate in the hierarchy of a Japanese company, which can be very, very stressful. You may have heard the word karoshi, which is death by overwork, and I definitely believe that, now that I live in Japan, it can be a thing here, because if you go to any major station in Tokyo during the peak work commute times, it is a nightmare. People are pushing, they're squeezing into these trains, and you see people running left and right and all these things. And this is completely my opinion, but I just think there's too much of a focus on specific ways things need to be. And Japanese people are really hard workers and very dedicated. But overall, Japan lands actually pretty low on the overall productivity rates across the world. It ranks 31st, and a lot of this does actually start in just poor work culture practices. And these are things that I've written articles about and done research about in college. But I've worked with Japanese companies, and I've heard stories that it's very common for people in their 20s to sleep at the office, spend multiple days there without showering or going home, and just going non-stop and working. It definitely broke my heart a little bit to see that happen, and just the people who are going through these things, they might not necessarily see that as their ideal lifestyle, and so it just was awful seeing how hard they're put to work on a daily basis. And I think that there are actually ways to improve that and at the same time increase productivity. So if you are easily affected by your environment, especially work-wise, I think it's important to find a good community here, because I definitely struggled with that in the first 2 years that I've been living here. Number 5, dating can be kind of tough. I wanted to share some anecdotes from some of my friends who have gone on dates here, as well as my experiences as well. I think the biggest thing, especially with online dating, is in Japan, especially from the girls' side, Japanese girls tend to expect that they're not going to be meeting you straight off the bat, and some of my American guy friends always were like, this makes no sense. Where, Japanese girls want to text for a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, do a call, maybe a couple calls, and then finally meet in person. Whereas, Western dating practices are kind of just like, okay, see you tomorrow. I don't know anything about you besides your name, but hey, we'll figure it out. And so it's definitely a lot slower and a lot more ambiguous, which I think can be a struggle. And when I was first dating in Japan as well, I feel like it was just really hard to know if someone was into me. I think it would just be very ambiguous and just sort of like, okay, this person is clearly not interested in me at all. And then at the end, they would be like, okay, so when would you like to go for our next date? And I'm like, okay, yeah. And so I think it's just sort of hard to just communicate when it's not as direct. But I feel like dating's like that all over the world, so it's fine. And number 6 is it's hard to kind of be yourself. And what I mean by this, going from a country like America, which is very individualistic and, be yourself, be who you are, blah, 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 blah. In Japan, it's a very collective culture where you always want to be aware of the other person, aware of your surroundings. Basically, it's not about you, it's about everything else and how you can best use yourself to support the greater good. And while that's incredible, it can be pretty difficult, especially because things are expected to only be one way and it's very cookie cutter. So if you love to, voice your opinions and do things how you like and kind of live by your own rules, it can feel pretty intense. If you're a foreigner in Japan and you've never felt this way, I promise you it is a real thing. I do think that if you haven't experienced this before, it is totally a gaijin smash moment, because they do expect foreigners not to adhere to these rules, which is great because, you can be yourself and enjoy Japan. It's the best of both worlds, but I think the more and more you begin to speak better Japanese, get used to Japanese customs, there is a little bit more of an expectation that you act a certain way, say certain things, or else it's a little bit harder to get close to people. But personally for me, I haven't really experienced too many issues, even when I speak Japanese, no one's ever negatively pointed out like my tattoos or said anything about how I color my hair, how I dress, like never experienced anything like that. But for me, I think within the first year or so, it was just kind of difficult because, you know, you kind of have to invent a new version of yourself to fit in with the crowd, and I just felt like I couldn't find a good balance of who I really was and who I guess I should be in this society. And yeah, it was definitely a limbo period. I think I'm almost out of there, but since Japan is such a homogenous culture and the rules are so strict, it kind of explains why on the internet it's kind of not like that. So if you go to Twitter or X in Japan, it is a bloodbath. Like, it is completely different. Japanese netizens or keyboard warriors, they are on something else and they are not afraid to voice their opinion. And I think it's because day to day they can't really voice their opinion as much. And so it's the opportunity that they have to say whatever they want. And so I've definitely gotten comments on my videos as well like this. And yeah, they just love going ham at each other. And I remember I was dating a guy a long time ago where he commented on a YouTube video to this guy who had his other opinion. And for the rest of the day, they basically attacked one another, arguing about this point and that point. You know, the whole day goes by and I'm kind of watching this unfold. My boyfriend at the time, at the end of the day, he comes up to me and he goes, "That was so fun. That was like invigorating. It felt so good when I proved the other guy wrong." And I was just like, oh, okay. I'm so happy for you. So thanks to the internet, I think people have a lot of ways to release their stress from their day-to-day environments. And number 7, you will always be a foreigner. And while I do think when you speak super fluent Japanese, there is a certain level you transcend where you can be friends with almost everyone and speak super fluent Japanese and live a life just like any other Japanese person. It's completely possible. But at the same time, day to day, when you go to a restaurant or go to the store, you will be a foreigner, and that is just the reality. Like, people will still compliment when you hold chopsticks right, they will compliment your Japanese, and they will point out where you should stand or what you should do in English. And even last week when I was in Shinjuku, a Japanese photographer came up to me and my friends and was like, "There's Godzilla over there. I don't think you noticed, but in 20 minutes, there's gonna be fire blowing out. Go see." And we were like, thank you. Actually, I did not even know that was real. Thank you to Mr. Oji-san for pointing that out for us. But yeah, I think the reality is you can live here your entire life and you will still have these experiences, and I think they're fun, so no issue there. But I will say the more you travel in Japan and experience different places, you will have the death stare, you will have the confused stare, or just the gaijin seat, which is a classic. At least for me, where I feel it the most is definitely the onsens, because people just don't see me coming when they're walking through a corridor, and so they're just sort of like, oh, okay. And so it's just part of the life here, and it's totally fine. And the final reason is the overall direction Japan is headed. So I've been here in Japan for 2 years. I plan on being here in the foreseeable future and maybe longer after that. But there are some key reasons why a lot of foreigners as well as Japanese people are reconsidering whether they want to live in Japan long term. And the first of that being, you know, earthquake risks or potential volcano explosions. There's just a lot of nature in Japan, which is truly its appeal, but at the same time, it creates a lot of risk, especially if you are trying to build a family here or build your lifestyle around this country. And personally, I just feel like wherever you live, you know, you're at risk of any sort of calamity. So that's not something that's crossed my mind too much. Although the little earthquakes here and there are pretty freaky, it is something that you do get used to. And the second one, which is more kind of top of mind, is overall, the economy in Japan is not looking so great, especially as the elderly population continues to grow. And this is known as shoshikoreka, and basically that means less kids and more elderly people. And the typical payment that you do for nenkin, so the pension, is pretty high for young people, and as more and more elderly people increase and less children are being born, if I were to continue to stay in Japan even once I am older, there is no saying that there's enough money to cover a pension for me because there are just not as many young people in the workforce. And so overall in Japan, I think with this problem as well as just how it's doing globally, I always believe that, Japan is incredible, and I hope that it can really go past these things and really be successful on the global front. However, from what I've seen just living in Japan, I think this is a little bit controversial, but I just don't think young people in Japan really care. At least the majority doesn't really care from what I've seen about these issues. And one big reason is that Japan is really nice to live in, and you can kind of be in heiwaboke, which kind of means like kind of being numb to everything else going on in the world because everything is just so peaceful. And that's kind of what Japan is, where it's super peaceful and you can really fall into heiwaboke living here. And I definitely felt it here because it's not often that people talk about societal issues or political issues. Obviously that's a generalization. I've met many people who are trying to change these things, but when we're talking about general population, it is a little bit bleak to see, and so I'm hoping that these things can change, and seeing how foreigners maybe could be a part of that as well. I think the Japanese government is trying to increase foreigners and immigration in general to kind of tackle this issue as well. I care about you guys, and so these are all the reasons I would share with you, especially given probably all the positive things you've also seen about Japan, to kind of, keep in the back of your head to see if Japan is really a realistic option of where you want to live in the future. All that being said, I still live here, I love living here, and I plan on being here, and I hope, if anything, this video encouraged you to be like, okay, I think these are fine, I still want to live in Japan. Then I'm so happy to hear that, and I hope you guys found this video useful. And if you guys are living in Japan or are planning on it, definitely share your 2 cents. Let me know if anything I said you didn't agree with or you did. Let me know your opinion in the comments below. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!